On the night of August 4, 1964, President Lyndon Johnson announced airstrikes against North Vietnam. But the airstrikes were in retaliation for an incident even those present in the Gulf of Tonkin doubted. This is the story of that decision, the airstrikes, and the escalation of the Vietnam War. This channel's mission is to challenge the Vietnam orthodoxy through reference to primary sources. Much of what you know about the Vietnam War is either incomplete or false. Please consider supporting this channel and its mission through Patreon. The link is in the description. The report from Phu Bai reached officials in Washington at 9 AM on August 4th. At 9:12, McNamara reported to the White House that an attack on the Maddox and Turner Joy was about to happen. President Johnson asked McNamara how long it would take to retaliate with an airstrike, and by 10 AM McNamara had convened an action group in his office. Johnson was concerned about the political consequences of not acting, and was determined not to appear weak. Speaking to congressional leaders hours later, only Senator Mike Mansfield opposed airstrikes. A consensus quickly emerged that North Vietnamese naval targets and a fuel storage facility at Vinh should be the targets for the airstrikes. It's uncertain if it was known that Van Hoa was the main base for PT boats, but it was removed from the planning list as it was close to China. The boats that were attacked were Swato boats and PT boats that were away from Van Hoa. The JCS completed their proposal at 1:25 PM, and McNamara discussed it with President Johnson. Johnson approved the strike on the storage facility at Vinh and expanded the number of naval bases on the list from 3 to 5. A message from Captain Herrick on the USS Maddox was received in Washington at 2:48. He was certain that original ambush was bona fide. McNamara had discussed the strike with the JCS by 3:25, and at 4:35 Admiral Sharp instructed Admiral Mura that boats were to be the primary target. At 6:07, Admiral Sharp and General Birchinall agreed that anti-aircraft guns that could interfere with the airstrikes could also be targeted. The aircraft carriers Ticonderoga and Constellation were ordered to prepare to launch strikes against North Vietnam. But senior officials did not send the instruction to execute the orders until they were satisfied with the evidence of the attack. The strike message was sent at 5:19 by the JCS, with orders to conduct strikes by 700 hours local time, which was intended to mean hotel time, 7 PM in Washington, less than 2 hours after the message was sent. But because communications were clogged with messages generated by the incident, the Ticonderoga did not receive the message until 6:10 Washington time, the Constellation 6:56. The carriers then interpreted this to mean the launch of the strike aircraft at 0700 Gulf, which was 0800 Hotel. But the delay was irrelevant. The Constellation was not in its launch position, and the Ticonderoga was waiting for attack aircraft to be flown in from the Philippines. CINCPAC and Washington were not aware of this lack of readiness. Admiral Sharp told Washington that the strikes would be complete and the aircraft on their way back to the carriers by 9 PM Washington time. At 8:39, McNamara asked Sharp if the aircraft had launched. "The President has to make a statement to the people. We're 40 minutes past the time I told him we would launch." He told Sharp he needed to know when the first strike aircraft would be over their targets. And at 9:09, Sharp told him that the launch had not taken place and would not do so for another 50 minutes. McNamara wanted the President to announce the airstrikes to the American people, and he wanted him to make the announcement before too many had gone to bed. The NSC, meeting around 6:10 PM, decided no announcement would be made until a strike aircraft had reached their targets, and Sharp told McNamara the aircraft would not take off until 10 PM. McNamara repeated this to President Johnson, that North Vietnamese radar would begin to pick the aircraft up at 10:30, and that the last aircraft would reach their targets at midnight. He suggested Johnson make his announcement at 10 PM, with reference to the specific action taken removed from his speech. It was decided at the end of the conversation that the announcement could be delayed until 10:30. At 10:02, Secretary of State Rusk advised Johnson to wait until the airstrikes were completed. Sharp told McNamara at 10:26 that he was sure the Ticonderoga launched at 10 p.m, but the Constellation would not launch until 1 a.m. In fact, the Ticonderoga had not launched, and to clear congestion on its deck, 4 A-1H Sky Raiders scheduled to participate in the strikes were launched around 10:45 p.m, with orders to orbit the carrier. At 11:20 p.m, Sharp told McNamara that the aircraft had launched at 10:43 p.m, but they would not be over their targets for another hour and 50 minutes. And at 11:25, McNamara told McGeorge Bundy, who took the call in the Oval Office, that the strikes had launched 40 minutes earlier. Bundy was delighted and told McNamara President Johnson would go on air in about 10 minutes. The White House Situation Room was informed the first aircraft were expected to reach their targets at 1:10 a.m, but President Johnson may have left the Oval Office before the information arrived. Neither McNamara or Johnson had a clear picture of the situation. President Johnson had spent part of the day lobbying members of the House of Representatives to vote for his poverty bill, and at 8:01 the FBI informed him that 3 civil rights workers had been found murdered in Mississippi. He talked with the Mississippi governor at 9:35 and the FBI at 9:40. At 11:37 p.m, President Johnson announced airstrikes against gunboats and certain supporting facilities of North Vietnam on US television. Only the Sky Raiders were in the air at the time. None of the attacks were actually carried out until an hour and a half after the televised announcement. The Ticonderoga was on the approximate latitude of Da Nang, and the Sky Raiders had orbited the carrier for about an hour when they started for their target, the fuel storage facility at Vinh, at 11:35 Hotel. At 12:16 Hotel, 12:16 a.m. in Washington, 12 jets began launching from the Ticonderoga, with orders to attack the facility at Vinh and nearby North Vietnamese patrol and torpedo boats. The jets started their attack at 13:25 Hotel, while 6 F-8s, launched later from the Ticonderoga, had started their attack on naval vessels at Quan Cay at 13:15 Hotel. James Stockdale led the strike on Vinh. At 1200 hours Hotel, the jet pilots manned their planes and learned that President Johnson had announced the strikes half an hour earlier. The jets joined the Sky Raiders close to shore and began their approach to the target at 13:28 Hotel. The 4 Sky Raiders and 2 Skyhawks attacked the fuel facilities, while 6 Crusaders and 4 Skyhawks protected them by attacking anti-aircraft guns, which didn't begin to fire until the jets pulled out of the first pass. After the initial attack, the aircraft attacked naval vessels in the area, and 1 or 2 jets strafed and fired rockets at the wharf next to the fuel storage facility. The first wave of aircraft launched from the Constellation at 1300 hours Hotel, a second larger wave at 14:30 Hotel. Aircraft from the Constellation did not reach North Vietnamese airspace until sometime after the strikes from the Ticonderoga had started. The Constellation had based its planning on the assumption that launches would be staggered so that strikes would be on target at the same time. The recommended time on target was 15:45 Hotel, but at 11:54 Hotel, the Constellation was notified the aircraft from the Ticonderoga would begin arriving on target at 13:10 Hotel. The boats at Hanoi weren't visible as the jets from the Constellation approached, the lead reporting that, "I see no boats tied to any pier," but then Lieutenant Alvarez sighted them anchored in the bay. All aircraft from the Ticonderoga returned safely to the carrier, but 2 aircraft from the Constellation attacking targets further north were shot down. Lieutenant Everett Alvarez Jr. in an A-4C Skyhawk made 2 passes attacking 4 Swatow boats and a submarine chaser in the harbour at Hon Gayen. Streams of black flak peppered the sky from naval craft and anti-aircraft batteries on the hills behind the harbour. As he departed the area, crossing the peninsula between the harbour and the sea, his aircraft was hit by anti-aircraft fire. Ejecting almost immediately, he landed a short distance offshore and was pulled from the water by 5 armed men in a small boat. Lieutenant Richard Satter was attacking two SWATO boats, T-130 and T-132, in the Lac Trung, Hanoi area when his sky radar was hit by fire from one or both vessels. He was not seen to bail out before his aircraft crashed into the sea, and reports were intercepted from Command Center K1 at Lac Trung on the recovery of his body. The US claimed 8 PTs and SWATOs destroyed and many more damaged, while Hanoi suggested only one vessel had been sunk and 5 seriously damaged, with 25 people killed. No torpedo boats were sunk, but 4 men were killed and others injured on T-333 and T-336 attacked in the Lac Trung Hanoi area. At least 1 and possibly 3 SWATO boats were sunk. SWATO T-187 was almost sunk by 6 aircraft off Vinh. Of the 35 officers and men on the boat, there were only 5 survivors. A radio listening unit in Hanoi had monitored President Johnson's announcement and passed the information to the PAVN High Command, who passed the message to Air Defense Command. However, the junior officer on duty doubted his authority to raise the alert, and when the alert was finally transmitted, the southernmost targets were already under attack. The US had been working on contingency plans for strikes against North Vietnam for months, but they were not ready to carry out those attacks on August 5th. Operation Pierce Arrow was launched at short notice and in response to an unexpected event. After the August 5th airstrikes, the JCS ordered SINCPAC to prepare the detailed plans necessary for attacks against the 94 target list. The 94 target list had been under discussion for months. A Harris survey reported 85% approval of President Johnson's action, and the Southeast Asia Resolution, better known as the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, was passed in Congress on August 7th, 88-2 in the Senate and 416-0 in the House. Secretary of State Rusk had presented a draft of the resolution to the NSC at about 6:30 p.m. on August 4th, and the wording was then negotiated with key leaders in Congress. The resolution gave President Johnson broad powers of action in Southeast Asia. The United States is prepared, as the President determines, to take all necessary steps, including the use of armed force, to assist any member of the Southeast Asia Collective Defense Treaty requesting assistance in defense of its freedom. But according to George Ball, Under-Secretary of State, within 2 or 3 days Johnson told him, "Those dumb, stupid sailors were just shooting at flying fish." The Tonkin Gulf incident was a turning point in Hanoi. It stiffened the resolve of the communists and strengthened the hand of those who wanted to escalate the war. Hanoi believed the August 4th incident was part of a US plot to intervene directly in the war and to destroy the North, confirming the fears of the pro-escalation group. A week after the incident, the Lao Zung Party Central Committee held an extraordinary meeting to discuss the incident and possible US intervention in the South. It was decided to dispatch combat troops from the North to South Vietnam. Lê Duan visited Beijing after the meeting and met Mao Zedong on August 13th. The Tonkin Gulf incident had increased Chinese fear of the US threat and strengthened their support for Hanoi. Moscow had been strongly opposed to escalating the war, but after the Tonkin Gulf incident it reconsidered its position. The Kremlin recognized that it had to support Hanoi if it wanted to maintain its leadership position in the communist world and its prospects of increasing Soviet influence in Southeast Asia. The North Vietnamese Politburo met from September 25th to 26th. They believed that the Saigon government could only survive while the communist main fighting force was not ready to fight a conventional war, and they concluded that the US was preparing to fight in the South to achieve a breakthrough and to expand the war to the North. Hanoi would develop its main fighting force as quickly as it could, while estimating that the process would take a few years. In the meantime, the war would be maintained at a low level, which would not provide a pretext to the Americans to transition from a special war to a limited war strategy, or expand the war into the North. The Central Military Commission and Ministry of Defence were ordered to draw up a plan to stop any such intention. While in the south, Kosovo advocated quickly defeating the special war strategy, consolidating its area of control, and seizing the initiative in an active offensive strategy to fight the anticipated American-led counteroffensive. Soon afterwards, Pham Van Zung and Hoang Van Hoan met Mao Zedong on October 5th. Mao thought it was possible that the Communists might defeat the South Vietnamese military, as he believed the US did not have the forces available to send to South Vietnam to save Saigon. But he encouraged Hanoi to avoid direct confrontation with the US. A protracted war would bring success. The Communists should only negotiate when they could defeat the Americans as badly as they had defeated the French.